Hi, everybody. I'm Katina McHenry at the McCombs School of Business, and thank you for joining us today on our Big Ideas Show, where we take a deeper look at faculty research happening here in our School of Business. Joining me today is a familiar face, Tricia Moravec. She is assistant professor in our IROM department, which is Information Risk Operations Management. Good to see you, Tricia. Thank you for joining us today.
So good to see you.
Yay! I get so excited every time I see somebody's face.
I know.
I'm like, I
and
miss
this is such
you.
a fun thing to be talking about and to be online for. So
I know. Well, Tricia is joining us today to talk about her new piece of co-authored research that ties in with her first piece of research, which you may remember was focused on fake news and really had to do with the 2016 election that focused on fake news on Facebook. And it was in regards to actual fake articles. So her new paper is titled Appealing to Sense and Sensibility, System 1 and System 2 Interventions for Fake News on Social Media. So first, let's just recap what your first piece of research focused a little bit more on, Tricia.
Okay, so that piece of research, that was, we talked about that about 9 months ago, I guess. And that research was looking at whether students could detect misinformation on social media and whether this misinformation flag that Facebook had debuted worked as they had intended it to. And essentially what we found was that people were very not good at detecting misinformation. And the flag that Facebook had debuted did not work to reduce people's belief in headlines that it was included on. We had EEG, or electroencephalography, included in that research, which showed us that although the flag didn't work as intended, people did think more about headlines that were aligned with their beliefs and flagged, which suggested that although the flag that they had been using at that time was not effective in reducing belief, people thought more. And that led us to this question of, well, was it just that the flag was designed poorly? Is it that a better designed flag, one based on theory, would be more effective in helping people actually detect misinformation, especially in this really important case where it aligns with your beliefs, where your confirmation bias would want you to believe it.
Right.
So that's what really prompted this paper that we're going to talk about today.
And so your follow-up paper, you guys took two different approaches to implementing a fake news flag. So talk a little bit about this new piece as a follow-up and what you guys really studied and what the outcome was.
So with this one, we were drawing on some of the theory that we used in the first paper, which was that people typically, the way we process information is one of two ways. We either process it with a gut level reaction or we process it with a more intentional reaction. And this is called type 1, type 2, system 1, system 2 processing by Kahneman. And what we were thinking here is that generally when people are on social media, they're more likely to be in a hedonic mindset, which means they're passively pursuing entertainment, not really actively pursuing anything. It's passive. And so given that they're in this hedonic mindset, it may be more likely that as they're processing information, they continue to stay in this system 1 gut level response, which is your first response to anything that you see in the world around you. It's the system 1, your gut level, intuitive, automatic response. But if you're searching for entertainment and you're on social media and you're like passively even looking for entertainment, are you really going to be motivated to think critically and move toward this system 2 reaction? And so based on this theorizing, we said, well, what if we made a flag that is intended to be processed most effectively with your gut level response? And then we made a flag that was most effectively processed when you thought critically about it with your system 2. And then if we added those two components together to create this combination flag, that would be very effective because first, you're going to respond to it with your system 1 gut level reaction, and it's going to have some effect there. But then as you continue to look at the flag, if you actually are prompted into this system 2 critical style thinking, it's going to be even more effective. And so that's what we were trying to do, was create this flag based on theory and see if it is more effective, but then also test whether by creating this very small awareness training, by telling people what the flag was intended to do, how that actually increases the effectiveness of the flag and helping people to disbelieve misinformation.
Did it make a difference which platform you guys used the flag on, or was there one particular platform that you used specifically?
We really looked at the Facebook platform for this because Facebook has, over 2 billion active users in the world. So there's so many more users. So for this, we just focused on Facebook, but you could likely generalize partially to other platforms depending on how likely people are to think critically.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to the flag, did it depend on what the flag looked like, or the particular pieces of news that the flag was on? Did that make any difference, any way or the other, with somebody's reaction to it?
Yeah, so it always makes a difference what type of headline the flag's on, because what we see across the board is that people are more likely to believe, or they show higher belief in headlines that align with their a priori beliefs or align with their confirmation bias.
Which is what you guys found in the first paper, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's something we always control for. That's not a main part of our study, but it's a control. We want to make sure that we are, accommodating for the fact that people are more likely to believe some information than others. But what we saw was that even with our confirmation bias, the combination flag was highly effective. And even when people weren't trained on the combination flag, even when they weren't made aware of the flag before they saw it, it was more effective at reducing belief than the other non-combination flags, even when people were trained on what they were. So when we combine the system 1 aspect of the flag with the system 2, which again, people may not be processing it in exactly the way that we're intended, but it's most effective if they do. So this combination flag was just so strong in reducing people's belief in headlines that it actually was one of these cases where its influence was far beyond that of confirmation bias, which is sometimes hard to do to kind of counteract confirmation bias. But here we were able to see that this combination flag was quite good at counteracting people's confirmation bias.
Right. So how is this relevant to today? In the last 9 months since your first piece of research, several of the platforms have made changes to the back end of how they categorize information, how they present information, how information is shared. So how is the research relevant to today? And I guess leading up to another election, how important is the research as well?
So I think it continues to be really important, right? With COVID-19 and all of the health misinformation that we've seen, I continue to wonder how we could have responded better to this global pandemic had we had something like these misinformation flags applied to videos and articles that were clearly misinformation.
Sure.
And especially when some of the health information that was being shared could potentially be deadly.
Right.
And in these cases, it's very clear to me that these misinformation flags could be very, very useful and likely very effective in producing better outcomes for us individually, but also for our country together.
Sure.
And as we've seen, Twitter has tried to start, taking some stand against misinformation. And I love seeing that. And I think that they could have a better designed flag. But as someone who's researching misinformation and who really just wants us to do everything we can to combat misinformation, I love that they're making an effort. Sure. I think they could have a better flag. I think that, using a flag like the one that we studied in this paper would likely be more effective, but I cannot fault them for at least taking action. Whereas with Facebook, it's a lot harder to see that they are taking action against misinformation.
Sure.
And I think they can continue to do better to counter misinformation on the platform.
Yeah, just recently on Twitter, you may have seen they suspended Donald Trump Jr.'s account because of an article, I think a video maybe that he...
It was a video on hydroxychloroquine, and it was full of misinformation. And I think that by taking these videos down, which is what they did, and then suspending the account for only certain activities for 12 hours, that's not a huge deal. That's not a super long amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this hopefully is something that will encourage these people who are sharing misinformation to more critically consider the content that they're sharing.
Sure.
And the problem with this is that this health misinformation, this pandemic, should not be political.
Right.
It's a health crisis, and there shouldn't really be politics involved. And so I think that them taking this stand and removing these videos, this is really great and this is positive. It's unfortunate to see the responses that suggest that it is political in nature. Right. When we're looking at this crisis, it should not be political.
Right.
It is a health crisis. Misinformation is causing more problems for the United States.
Sure.
And any way that we can counter that misinformation is positive. And hopefully we can get to a point where that's not a political issue, but I don't have a ton of hope for that.
Well, it seems like your research is obviously it's relevant, but it also seems like it could be never ending because of how we're progressing, and what we're in the midst of. So what do you think is important for you to research next now that you know what you know just from these two papers?
I mean, I have so much more research in progress right now. And I think, as you said, it's just this problem isn't ending anytime soon as far as we can see, which it could, right? There's a way that this could end, and my research stream would kind of fizzle out. And I honestly wouldn't be mad because that would be good for all of us, right? But since that's not happening, there's all of these questions about, how this misinformation is continuing to spread that some people are studying, which is great. I am continuing to look at different ways that we can share information on social media to help people make more responsible decisions about the information they're consuming rather than just believing something that aligns with their confirmation bias without critically considering it. So constantly looking at these different types of interventions, not all for misinformation, some for political bias. How can we help people consume more neutral news so that we can actually bring people back together instead of this political divide that we're continuing to see? Yeah. And then try to continue with my EEG research, but that proved to be very difficult during a global pandemic when this type of research is unfortunately on hold. Yeah. So that is unfortunate.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Tricia. It's good to see you again. If you'd like to read more about Tricia's research with her other two co-authors, we will have a link in the description, but the paper is titled Appealing to Sense and Sensibility, System 1 and System 2 Interventions for Fake News on Social Media. Again, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for joining us, our audience, on our Big Idea Show. We will see you next time.